All right. So, I'm pretty sure you know how lives work. But there might
This is
not be too
my
many
first time.
people. Oh, this is your first time?
Be gentle with me, Amber.
Okay. So there might not be too many people joining in right now, but they'll probably watch the playback.
Sure.
So don't get alarmed if you don't see
No,
people. Usually they come in and they'll like drop a comment.
that's perfect.
So, I met you. So we've met in person.
We've met
That's
in
how.
person.
Yes,
That's
that's how
right.
we met. I didn't know who you were until we met in person,
Mhm.
and then we hit it off really well. I remember that, and then we talked on and off, and
Mhm.
we've been talking about collabing and filming some stuff together.
Absolutely.
And would you like to introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Ron Murphy, and for about 30 years, I've been interested in the paranormal ever since I've been a kid. My mom got me involved in, all the Bigfoot stuff that was going on in the 70s, and I just had an open mind for things that go bump in the night. I went to college and I studied anthropology, and I studied literature, and I studied history, and as I studied these other cultures around the world, I could start seeing suggestions of the archetype, the wild man. Every culture around the world has something supernatural to it: ghosts,
Hmm.
werewolves, vampires. So I took that love for the paranormal and I started to look at it through a multidisciplinary lens to try to get at the heart of why these things mean so much to who we are as human beings.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think it's fascinating. I do like to go out. Like, I watch your filming and I'm in awe by it because I am one of those people that have to still sleep with a nightlight on. Like, I'm not quite that person because, I scare myself about this stuff. One of the
Yeah.
reasons why I investigate and one of the things that I write about these things is because it's kind of a catharsis, or maybe even closer to an exorcism, if you will,
Hmm.
because these things scare me so much that I want to really look at them up close, because the closer you get to something, sometimes it's not quite as frightening.
Right.
But in the case of vampires and werewolves, sometimes the closer you get, the more astonishingly terrifying it becomes.
Yeah.
So I have this kind of wide-eyed view of the world around me. I'm necessarily skeptical because I don't want to be clumped in with those people that believe everything offhandedly.
Hmm.
But I've witnessed enough things anecdotal, and I've heard enough eyewitness reports that leads me to believe that there are things out there that are happening that can only be called supernatural, because what else are they? Because we have not explained them through natural processes, so at this point they are supernatural.
Hmm.
Yeah. So Bigfoot is my big thing. I really like monsters. I really like cryptids. But you and I met whenever there was, a ghost investigation. We met at
Hmm.
a haunted, iconic location in Western Pennsylvania. And but what I'm finding, and I think that you're probably finding this as well, whenever you go out there, whenever you go out ghost investigating, you're starting to run into people more and more that have these other interests as well. Not they're not just
Hmm.
pigeonholed into the supernatural, the ghostly, supernatural. Um, People are drawn to UFOs. They're drawn to Loch Ness monsters, and they're drawn to all this other kind of stuff, because I firmly believe whenever we talk about the paranormal, there is a gray area which encompasses all of these things. And if we don't keep an open mind and we don't investigate all these other kind of things that are going on, we really can't get to the heart of the matter for any of this stuff. I don't think that you're going to be able to explain ghosts away or UFOs away or Bigfoot
Hmm.
away until we get them all in the same room and we start analyzing them as a collective.
I agree. It's like I've met quite a few different people. So I don't really meet too many people now because now that I'm filming independently and I'm
Mhm,
trying to make my YouTube channel look more professional,
mhm,
I film like investigations privately.
mhm,
So it's just me. But I'll get into groups and I'll talk to people on Facebook, and there's quite a few different people who believe in like Bigfoot and UFOs and ghosts. Generally, usually the people who believe in one thing believe in most other things.
mhm. That's right.
So,
That's
and
right.
I find that very interesting, and I don't know if it's just because they like the suspense or like the mystery, or if it's just because they're open-minded.
I think a little bit of both, but what I've also found out from personal experiences is that a lot of the places where people are witnessing Bigfoot or UFO sightings, they also have a collection of ghost stories connected with the area as well too.
I kind of noticed
Yeah,
that too because actually, so I just went and did my first Bigfoot investigation ever,
nice.
and
Where did you go?
well, I don't want to give out too much
Oh, okay,
information
right.
because I don't want
What's
people going, but
what state?
here in Indiana.
Okay, great, great, great.
So there is a couple different cemeteries in that area, and when I was with this group, they were like, "Oh yeah, there's this cemetery over here, and people experience like tree knocks or Bigfoot calls, and they also experience voices
Mhm.
or apparitions and stuff like that." And I was like, "Oh, that's a little weird. That's kind of like tied together."
Right, right. The same way around here in Western Pennsylvania. Many places that I've experienced have, the quintessential cemetery,
Mhm.
but then you have the Bigfoot encounters as well too. Now, if you look at the traditions from the Middle Ages, one of the ways that people would describe the woods being haunted is because they heard knocks. Now, today, if we would hear knocks, we associate this with Bigfoot.
Mhm.
But that kind of knocking, that kind of poltergeist activity was associated with, of course, ghosts or fairies or some sort of manifestation of that. But now when we go out of the woods and we hear these kind of things, we automatically assume there's some sort of hairy
Bigfoot, yeah.
bipedal creature doing it. So we interpret the paranormal uh, with each generation. We're
Yeah.
always going to view it through our perspective, which is very interesting because there's an evolution to this and there's an anthropology to this. But again, we have to keep our minds open. I spoke to people that were investigating a haunted location, and they were getting a lot of orbs. And the gentleman went out to his car to change the battery in his flashlight, and in the sky he saw orbs, and then they
Hmm.
would vanish, and then he figured out after a while that he would call in on his walkie-talkie, and whenever the orbs were appearing up in the sky, they were appearing also in the house. So you see the
That's
kind
really
of
weird, yeah.
connection, right? And I have also in Canada and in the United States, as well as a few instances in England, I have been seeing, and I don't know if you've seen any of this yet because it's kind of startling, people who are photographing haunted locations and getting images of what appear to be grays, aliens, for lack of a better word. And the skull experiment back in the 70s that was conducted in England, a group of people came together, scientists and parapsychologists came together to see if they could intentionally contact the spirit world.
Hmm.
And as they all gathered together, they were starting to get almost like certain poltergeist activity, knocks and things. They would utilize spirit boards and talking boards, but
Huh.
whenever they had the actual full body manifestations, they came out as these big almond eyed, ball headed creatures, these grays. And one time, as the story goes, they actually manifested a very small UFO that appeared above the table and analyzed everybody in the room and then eventually disappeared.
That's
Um,
really cool.
yeah, it is really cool. Yeah. Robin Foy, who was the leader on this particular experiment, I had a chance to interview him a few years ago. He lives in Italy now, but he's from England. And yeah, it was to hear him talk about this. He wasn't so much startled as he was just simply amazed about what was going on.
Yeah.
So I mean, that is the other thing too. Whenever we talk about ghosts, um, are we talking about a soul that is somehow stationed in some sort of earthbound purgatory? Are we talking about a part of the human essence that stays behind and the
Hmm.
soul crosses? Or could we also be talking about things like fairies or things like something extraterrestrial or ultra terrestrial or interdimensional? We really
Yeah.
don't know what we're talking about. But whenever it comes to ghosts, that is really the only part of the paranormal world that I can emphatically say these things exist. And I think that most people will agree upon that. I think
Yeah.
that if you would take, a general consensus that probably 80 or 90% of the population believe in ghosts, but they would see Bigfoot as something that's irrational. But I've had enough experiences personally and as an investigator to wholeheartedly understand that there is something going on there, that there is an essence of us that exists. There's that energy that we give off that
Yeah.
exists long after the mortal coil is shuffled off. And I think that that's really one of the things that keeps me going as well too, is knowing that hey, look, if ghosts are real, then why can't these other things have some sort of credence to them as well?
Yeah. And I like that with ghosts or like spirits, you can get like evidence.
Mm.
But the thing that I like about Bigfoot is there's physical evidence, because
There's
when you think about the difference between the two, there really isn't physical evidence when it comes to ghosts.
That's right.
But there's a lot of physical evidence when it comes to Bigfoot.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing about hauntings is they're very subjective. We might go into a room and you see something and I don't see
Mhm.
anything, and vice versa. But yeah, that's absolutely the case. I think that one of the romantic elements about Bigfoot is that you could go out into the woods and bring back something, whether
Yeah.
it's a track or a hair sample or something like that. And you can also interact with it in a way that you can also interact with the spirit world, but it's not. It's different than who we are, right? It's not the same as us. So it's something different that's out there to be discovered. But no, I mean, look, these are all very important elements that go into the world of a paranormal researcher or an investigator.
Yeah.
It's not as cut and dry as people think that it is. When we go out there into locations, we really don't know what we are going to uncover, if anything whatsoever, but we do not know what's going to happen to us.
Yeah, that's very true. So getting into the paranormal side, you said that you've been all over and done investigations. Now, when you say investigations, are they paranormal investigations or are they more like cryptid investigations?
A little bit of both. And that's a great question, Amber. So, whenever I go out looking for whether it's a cryptid or, I keep my mind open for anything that might happen.
Mhm.
I've been on Bigfoot investigations that led to some stunning video evidence of lights, Earth lights moving around.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I've been on a dogman expedition one time and picked up disembodied voices that were saying my name.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
yeah, so again, there's an element where all these things kind of bleed into or bleed out of what whichever way you look at it. So what we're dealing with here is again something that's intrinsically linked together, and I do believe the more I investigate this, the more it comes down to the idea of frequencies and vibrations. I actually wrote a book a
I
couple
agree. Yeah.
years about this. Yeah, so some people possibly like yourself, or people that call themselves clairvoyant or psychic or what have you, they almost act as a paranormal hotspot. They go into these places and it's almost as if whatever they're putting out is allowing whatever is in that particular environment to manifest itself.
Right.
It's almost as if they're feeding off of that person. So I do think that we are dealing with something that may possibly be defined by some sort of physics or some sort of science. But I believe that there is an element of vibrational frequencies that are out there that can really kind of get to the bottom of all this. Like when people take pictures of Bigfoot, they always say that it's all fuzzy or the blob squatch or what
Yeah.
have you. And it's very possible that what they are seeing is a frequency. And whenever you try to photograph it, you can take a picture of energy, but it's allowing it's allowing itself to
Mhm.
be perceived in a certain way, or you're actually, um, you're defining what you're seeing. Uh, just through your own mental makeup. So yeah, I'm at that level right now, especially whenever I did a lot of research on fairies. It seems that the idea of elementals and the idea of nature requires that kind of synchronization of energies for these things to not only manifest themselves, but for us to interact with them.
Hmm. Well, I think that's really interesting that you bring that up because when I was younger, like I was really, really into Bigfoot. And I kind of crossed over from Bigfoot into like the ESP, like psychic kind of stuff. I was into that for a while and I read a lot of books. And I remember I remember being fascinated by the people that could like bend spoons like
Mm.
with their mind. And I was like, how the hell does that work? Like most people might think that maybe like it's an illusion or something like that. But I think if I remember correctly that it actually has to do with vibrations.
Mm. Yeah, if I can remember, who was the guy? Last name was Geller. I think that it was
I don't remember.
Yuri Geller. Yuri Geller was his name, where he would take a spoon and just kind of like touch it and would bend. Um, so as physics goes, how everything is made up and everything is molecular, there is a theory that we can uh, impact these kind of atoms and molecular structure through our own energy, and that appears to be what's happening. Um, Also keep in mind too, because that's great whenever you said about Bigfoot, and then you kind of transitioned into the whole kind of psychic ESP
Yeah.
side as well too. In Native American traditions and in First Nation traditions out of Canada, Bigfoot was never seen as simply a flesh and blood animal. It was a being that straddled the world of the tangible and the holy or the sacred, and that idea that it's almost kind of like a messenger
Hmm.
from the other side. Um, that, in a way, as well too, leads more to the idea that these things are frequency based, or at least need to transcend into our world from
Yeah.
another realm. You know, yeah, it's hard because whenever we talk about this kind of stuff, and I'm sure that the people that tune into this really want to hear this kind of banter, but I don't want there to be so much woo in it that it sounds like it's something
Yeah.
off the Sci-Fi Channel.
Yeah.
These are all theories, these are all speculations, and this is all conjecture. But the more that I look into it, it seems as if when we talk about ghosts or whatever, they live in a world that requires different physics than what we have, and even the idea of communication with the other side. Whenever we talk about Ouija boards, there's that movement, there's that vibrational movement, or whenever something says your name, or we even require the spirit boxes that have to go through so many channels to pick up
Hmm.
certain things. We are relying upon that electricity that's out there, that electricity that kind of makes us who we are, that kind of that stardust from which we came, that connects us all. And I really think that we, and I don't want to sound like I'm getting up on a pedestal here, but I think that we as human beings have stepped out of that frequency, that kind of natural balance,
Hmm.
and you see all kinds of weird diseases popping up right now, and people fighting with each other, and we have a lot of disease, which word just comes out because you're no longer at ease anymore. You're no longer in the synchronization of everything. But I truly believe, the more I investigate this, that the key to this is an energy, and I believe that whenever people do experience these things, for the most part, it is almost as if there's um, an unspoken contract between the viewer and the subject, and there almost has to be like a switch that's flipped, um, in order for that kind of electricity to current through to allow someone to experience and to allow for the manifestation as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Let me think. So you mentioned Dogman earlier,
Mhm.
and I find that super interesting. And I think I told you this when we had met, but I'm actually from Michigan, so I grew up in
That's right.
Michigan, and I grew up hearing about the Dogman,
Mhm.
but it was more so as it was like a silly thing that they would do every year around Halloween.
Mhm.
They would play the Dogman song, and the Dogman song is like written by a local newscaster, maybe
He
like
was a DJ, right?
that's what it was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. and he wrote that as an April Fool's joke. And I
Mm,
guess people enjoyed it so much that they started asking for it. But I just
right.
remember growing up and hearing
Mm,
it every Halloween, and my sister was like deathly afraid of the song.
mhm,
But
mhm,
yeah, so it would just talk about the dog man, and it was obviously wrote by somebody who lived in the area, so he threw in all these tidbits of like pieces of land, so like
mm,
just the cities around, or like the little villages, or like the
right.
areas. And I just remember like being a kid going, oh my god, like I've been there, or I
Mhm,
live there, like.
mhm, mhm.
And I just
Well,
remember being scared.
well, I think, Amber, what makes the Dogman so interesting is that we assume that, in the '70s, whenever this song was created, which I think was in the
Yeah,
1970s,
I don't remember
yeah,
exactly, but yeah.
that it somehow came out of a vacuum, which it did not. This piece of entertainment would have absolutely no value, or would have no currency whatsoever, unless it was based upon some sort of folkloric or
Right.
mythological evidence, right? So we can see that in Michigan, especially in the North Woods up there, when everything was wild,
Yeah.
as late as, or as early as the mid to late 1800s, loggers would go out there, and they would bring back reports of seeing bipedal creatures with the head of a dog or a wolf. So the reason why that song was so effective, that it tapped into that mythology
Yeah.
that was so
Well,
centralized
I
there.
remember I was reading an interview from the guy that wrote that,
Mm,
and they asked him if he had heard of the Dog Man before, and he said he didn't. He
mhm,
said he didn't know that the Dog Man was even like a real thing.
mm,
And I guess people were coming forward and calling him and telling him that they had seen one.
mm.
But
Yeah,
I'd like to think that you can't just like pull something out of your imagination like
right.
that. I wonder if he did see, like,
Mm.
subconsciously, like maybe read something about it, like forgot or
Right.
something.
Sure. Yep. I think that's what happens, because even if you don't follow this kind of stuff, you are going to get enough cultural references, even if it's subconsciously placed into your
Yeah.
mind. And I think that's probably what happens. I mean, people that don't read Harry Potter still can pick out aspects of Harry Potter, because it's
Yeah.
been so much. I interviewed a gentleman that said that he saw two brownie figures, and brownies are these little creatures that more or less inhabit a certain residence. But he pulled that name out of Harry Potter, even though he's never read Harry Potter. It's
Huh.
just
I
something
thi
that's
yeah.
out there. It's just something out there. So yeah, I mean, people are informed by the world around them,
Yeah.
and what we call ghosts and what we call Bigfoot. Um, the succeeding generations will identify them and view them and interpret them as something completely different
Right.
than we are.
That's
Yeah.
very true.
Yeah. We stand on the shoulders of giants. We have to understand whenever we're in this business. We have to look at all the kind of research that's went on before us.
Mhm.
And as researchers ourselves, we have to be very diligent about passing on the correct information to those people that are going to be going forward. But I doubt that we are ever going to get to a conclusion
I
on
agree.
these kind of, but that's what makes it so fun,
Yeah.
Amber, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And we all share in this kind of paranormal archaeology. We are all out there. We're all Indiana Joneses out there. We all are going through the sand and trying to find the basis for all these kind of legends and lore. And what's so interesting is that I'm not going to be able to discover everything, and you're not, but we can also work together, because gosh darn it, it is fun sifting through
Yeah.
that sand.
Well, see, my favorite thing, like you said earlier, is passing on the correct information.
Mm,
And that's always been my thing. Like, you hear from repeatedly from TV shows, oh, don't do this, or oh, this is a portal, or like whatever. But how do you know that?
mm,
Like,
that's
that's my thing. So I like taking the theory that has been prevented, or the theory that has been passed down for these generations, and I like flipping it. I like testing it. I like
right.
just looking at it from a different view and going, well, I don't know if that is, can that be proven? Like,
Right.
that's how I operate, I
Yeah.
guess.
No, I think that's a good point. Look, I think it's good to think outside of the box, but sometimes it's also good to just get rid of that whole damn box altogether, right?
Hmm.
So we are explorers. We're exploring the world around us. I think it's necessary that we kind of document everything that goes on and don't have any preconceived expectations whenever you go
Right.
in case something would happen that is contrary to what you expected. You can't throw out that evidence because that might be a clue to something else that somebody else is researching. Because
Right.
as a Bigfoot researcher, I've heard very many times whenever people would give a Bigfoot report, and there are people that are in the camp that Bigfoot is a flesh and blood animal, and whenever they hear about the Bigfoot communicating with them telepathically or disappearing or somehow filtering in and out, they immediately throw this out because it does not fit into their schema, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't fit their perception. But we have to keep an open mind. We have to
Yeah.
include all this kind of stuff because that element may mean something later on down the road.
It's like being biased
Mhm,
about and just picking and kind of choosing, which is
mhm,
not necessarily what you want to do, but also the paranormal is really, really based around perspective
mhm.
as well. So, like you said earlier, I might be looking at something and perceiving it in a different way than what you might be looking at. So, I
That's
think
right.
that's part of kind of what makes it a little complicated, and maybe that's why we're not ever gonna get
Mhm.
like answers on it. But also, it like you said, it's like really fun, and I
Right,
like
right.
doing it.
And I'm glad that we're not getting answers because these things that we investigate really put we as humans in our place, right? We
Mhm.
think that we know all that there is out there. We've left this planet, we've explored the vastness of this galaxy, and we think in our hubris that we gosh darn know pretty much what's going on.
We
But
do.
these things allow us to be put on our place, to think that we have not conquered every square inch of this earth, that that no matter what religious aspect that you have, that the soul does go on after death, and that all this stuff that we're living here that we're living in, it makes sense somehow. We're not doing this in vain. There's something out there that's bigger than us,
Yeah.
yet still intimately a part of us as well, too. It might be the things that go bump in the night, but somehow we are still connected in this. I wrote one thing in one of my books is that these creatures, they need us as much as we need them. We keep them alive and they keep us alive, whether
Yeah.
it's in folklore or legends or these are or tangible flesh and blood creatures. Whatever is the case, they need us. It's a symbiotic relationship, and I really like that aspect. I do like that aspect because I don't want to be so prideful that I'm not afraid of the shadows that creep outside my door at night, which is the reason I have to put
Mhm.
on a night
It's almost like being grounded spiritually in like some sort of weird connected way. I
It
don't,
does.
it's
It
hard.
is.
It's hard to explain, but um, what is moving back to the cryptid side?
Sure.
What is your favorite cryptid? I would probably guess Bigfoot for you.
Bigfoot, absolutely. You
Okay,
you
yeah.
have to. So somebody interviewed me one time and said, "What is the fascination with Bigfoot?" And then some young lady suggested that it might be my alter ego, and in a way, it might be everybody's alter ego, right? It's that wild kind of force that's out there. That kind of it doesn't live by any rules, right?
Yeah.
It it doesn't need to work a job, yet it's still happy in the woods. It can take a vacation whenever it wants to. It doesn't have to shop for clothes. Gosh darn it, I would like to be like that. I would like to
Yeah.
be that wild, uncivilized force in the universe that is educated in the world around them and is kind of absconded from all this kind of clutter that's in our lives and just lives that very simple, natural life. And I think that it probably is my alter ego in a way. It is almost like the poster child for a green movement. for,
Yeah.
let's save the planet type of thing. And it also is a link to our very distant past, because this wild man creature has been with us, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was written right around the same time the pyramids were being erected. We have the story of Enkidu in there, which appears, for all intents and purposes, to be a Bigfoot creature, a wildman creature. It's a bipedal, hair-covered creature. And if we would assume that the Epic of Gilgamesh was based upon an oral tradition, we might be going back, thousands of years before the advent of Egyptian society. So these things have been with us for a very, very long time, and they continue to be with us even now. And not only do they continue to be with us in folklore, people are still claiming that they're seeing these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I like about Bigfoot is, one, there's so much evidence that you can base around Bigfoot, like audio, DNA, footprints, you have video, things like that.
Mm,
And then another thing that I like about Bigfoot is the um the diversity of different regions experiencing the same thing.
mhm,
It's not just limited to one area, kind of like Nessie.
mhm.
It's kind of everywhere.
Perfect point. Perfect point. And from a naturalistic point of view, which this is very interesting, is that these creatures also interact with the environment in the same way around the world as well too.
Yeah, it's like the same stuff.
It's the same stuff, right? The same type of habits, the same type of instincts, the same type of, uh, it just makes sense from a naturalistic point of view.
Mhm,
And even in Australia, whenever we think about Australia, so separated from everything, and they have the tale of the Yowie down there,
mhm.
and this even acts like the Bigfoot. So if a Bigfoot investigator in Pennsylvania could go to Australia and have really no problem in the investigative process, because these creatures act so similarly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very true.
Yeah, and now whenever we get to, like, Tibet, or we get into the Himalayas, and that particular area, there is going to be a much more spiritual aspect whenever we come to the Yeti.
Yeah.
But if you would strip down the kind of pseudo religiosity of this creature, it still acts very much like an animal within its particular surroundings. They've been known to kill cattle. They've been known to be territorial, and it acts as a creature that lives in a particular time and space.
Mhm. So, you mentioned earlier that you have been to Canada.
Uh-huh.
Did you go to Canada to do Bigfoot investigations?
Well, the first time I was in Canada was whenever I was a small child, and that was to Niagara Falls. But
Okay.
the other times that I've been to Canada, sure. So I went to Maine, and I went to New Brunswick, and these places are um, not very well habited by human beings. These
Mhm.
are big woods up there, and it's the perfect place for such creatures to exist. Um, so perfect, as a matter of fact, is that I did not encounter anything,
Oh.
and that makes sense though, because these woods are very thick,
Mhm.
and it's very daunting for a human being to go in there and try to find their way around, almost like the Everglades. And I have been on a skunk ape expedition as well too,
Mhm.
down in the Florida Everglades. These places, these extremes, whenever we talk about the way, the parallels and everything, whenever you go too far north, it becomes very unlikely for human beings to be up there, because it gets cold and it's not
Yeah.
very, very nice. The same way applies on the polar opposite. If you go south, things become very inhospitable as well. These are perfect places for these kind of creatures to make some sort of niche for themselves, because not only do not a lot of people go there,
Mhm.
but if they can go far back in there, nothing's going to be coming looking for them.
That's very true. So, you do all types of cryptids, correct?
Mhm. I do.
You write about them, and do you investigate all cryptids, or?
I do. It's hard to believe whenever we talk about this kind of stuff in 2022. Whenever you talk about like vampires, but vampires still, there are vampire traditions and folklore about, and people still witnessing vampiric creatures to this very
Mhm.
day. So yeah, I try to go out there and investigate all this stuff.
Now, how would you conduct something like that? Because I've never thought about investigating things, but I have heard from like different people. Oh, I experienced this, or like I saw a zombie, or like stuff like that.
Sure,
So
sure,
you
sure.
do hear it, but how do you go about with the information that you're given?
Right. So it's basically like what we're doing right now is that I'll be at a conference or I'll be on a radio show where somebody will just, contact me,
Mhm.
via social media or whatever and say I've experienced this or I've experienced that. And once you have that little bit of information, then you go and you research to see if anybody else has had these kind of occurrences. And sometimes just a quick Google search and you can find out that yeah, indeed people have
Yeah.
experienced these things. But I go by word of mouth. I go by the interview process. I go by talking to people, and sometimes people just give me a heads up and say, "Hey, there's been a sighting here, or somebody has has witnessed something that is completely inexplicable." In Erie, Pennsylvania, of all places, there is a vampire's tomb up there. Well, at least that's part of the common folklore of that area.
Hmm.
It's a mausoleum up there where there's somebody was believed to come back in the late 1800s from Romania, of all places. He passed away, was buried in this mausoleum, and then soon after, people started to be found on the outskirts of Erie, drained of their blood.
Yeah.
Now, there is zero corroborating evidence for this, nothing in the papers or anything,
Right.
but that is part of their folklore. And that's good enough for me because I am as interested in the forests out there as I am in that gray matter that inhabits our human imagination as well too. I like to get my feet muddy in both,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's more interesting when we go deep into the human mind to see what kind of things live there. But for whatever reason people are claiming to see these things, whether it is based upon fact or based on some sort of psychological reasoning, that's still of interest to me, and I
Yeah.
still want to figure out what's going on. So yeah, vampire graves. Look, New Orleans still has a very active vampire mythos that
I was gonna
surrounds that.
say, I when I hear vampires, I think New Orleans, and
Right, right.
I'm pretty sure I saw something like some sort of documentary about it or
Oh,
something, and
absolutely,
that
yeah,
was probably
yeah.
why.
Now, keep in mind, if you are going to New Orleans and you are going there because you believe that vampires may exist there, the opportunity for you to experience a vampire in your own mind is going to be much greater than somebody that's going down there just for Mardi Gras. Keep that in
Mhm.
mind
Yeah.
because these are all things that are kind of put into the mind there before you head off. But look, there are vampire bars in New Orleans. There's vampire bars in Tokyo and in New York. People identify with this creature very much.
Mhm.
There's some sort of romance in there. If you wanted to, have somebody suck your blood tonight, there are plenty of websites that you can go to,
Yeah.
and somebody would come to your door immediately, and vice versa.
Yeah.
I had interviewed people in writing my vampire book, and we met at a Denny's, and they were very open about how you go about becoming a sanguine vampire and how the blood was extracted. But this in essence is role playing, isn't it? Right? This is kind of like live action cosplaying for the adult generation. I'm more concerned about these other things that go farther back in
Yeah.
time and have this kind of lineage to Lilith from the Old Testament. And indeed, we do have on occasion the sightings of what we would call the quintessential vampire.
Mhm. Well, see, because that makes me wonder, because you know, people are always talking about like, oh, witches, and of course, based on what people have been presented, passed down through the generations and pop culture and things like that. You think green skin, warts, things like that, and witches aren't like that at all.
No,
It's
no, no.
more so of a craft or a practice.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we do see this in a lot of art forms as well too. Whenever the vilification of the witch was taking place, they were seen as very ugly things. But
Mhm.
whenever we get to some of the masters like Waterhouse and Parrish, in their art of witches, the witches are seen as very seductive, very beautiful, and very powerful women. Because
Mhm.
that was one of the things that concerned people so badly, is that hey, this woman has power that men don't have, and that's
Yeah.
scary. That will upset. But oh no, I've always been a big fan of witches and witchcraft as well too. So
I think
uh,
it's super crazy how they're painted so bad, like in such a bad light. It makes zero sense to
It
me.
does.
They're literally just practicing their own religion or whatever, style they have. It's no different from somebody who attends church or anything like that.
Right. Well, you just made the point. Okay, so let's go back in time to the Middle Ages and say that you're a nice young girl that lives in my village, and you don't necessarily want to attend church, even though attending church in the Middle Ages was mandatory. Because you
Mhm.
had to pay and it was all taxed. Um, at that point, it seems that you're subverting the status quo. And not only are you subverting the status quo, you are turning the very patriarchal world upside down. And that is what's so terrifying.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you knew this or not, Amber, but in the past few years, I've come to the realization that women have a mind of their own. I think you probably knew that as
No,
well
I know
too.
that.
Okay, right, right. So that being said, that scares the hell out of men because we are supposed to
Yeah.
be the tough, we are supposed to have control over all of those things around us. And, up until the very, up until the Victorian period, women were seen to be almost subservient to the man and the man knew what was best for them. The
Mhm.
woman was just there simply to serve the man. My goodness, now a woman can cure where a doctor can't cure, right?
Yeah.
Or deliver a baby, or give lessons on animal husbandry. This throws the entire world out of focus, and it makes the male very, very scared. And that is why all of these persecutions have happened with witches around the world is because the male cannot accept that the woman has inherent power, and also they're able to do things that look. Women can create life, we can't create life, right? I mean that's the one way to look at it. So um, yeah, I've always been interested. I did write the last book that I wrote on my On series, which started off with mermaids
Mhm.
about 10 years ago, actually concluded with on witches, and witches are should never be seen as paranormal. They should always be seen as something extremely natural. And I
Mhm.
think that every woman has a little bit of witch in them, and I think that every woman needs to let that witch out.
I definitely agree. They're definitely witches are not paranormal. It's more of spiritualistic,
Right.
if anything. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. And men can be witches as well too.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah. But I think there's something about the power though. I truly getting back to that whole idea. I think the idea of power and the way that power manifests itself can only be adequately done in the hands of a woman, and I think that that's the reason why there is that stereotype
Yeah,
there
there's
of the woman. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
So you mentioned mermaids. My
Yes.
daughter loves mermaids.
So does
Talks about mermaids all the time.
so does mine. That's the reason I wrote the book. Yeah.
So what is your book about? Is it just like the folklore of mermaids, or did you present any evidence in your book to support the theory on mermaids or anything like that?
Sure, all the above.
Okay.
So I was investigating the skunk ape of all things in
Hmm.
Florida, and I was at this very little inlet, and I saw a brief roll of water. The water was pretty flat, but I saw this really brief roll of water, and then I saw this little tail that came up and splashed down very quickly. And then there was another little roll of water, and it was a manatee, right? And it was a
Oh yeah,
manatee.
yeah.
Yeah, and it was spectacular to see. It was just a baby; it wasn't very large, but
Mm.
it was probably about the size of a woman. Probably five
Yeah.
two or whatever. And so that really kind of instilled in me that maybe there is something to these legends of the mermaid, because Christopher Columbus had reported on his first voyage to America or to the New World that he had seen mermaids,
Oh, cool.
and they weren't quite as beautiful as they were or told, or as you should believe. He said they were a little bit more ugly, although I find manatees very, very cute. But people have always seen something out in that water. Now, whether it is the kind of hope that there's something like us out there, or whether they are seeing something like a mermaid or whatever, there's always been something out there.
Hmm.
And I go through my book and I look at some cryptids out there, like the extinct stellar sea cow that was killed off probably the last 150 years or so, or maybe not even that long, which is a very large sized manatee that could have been accounted for some of these kind of tells, especially up in the Arctic areas, because all areas, it's not all tropical areas, all areas have reports of mermaids in them. But
Hmm.
I think that a lot of it is wishful thinking. A lot of it is also um, theology. There's a lot of, because at one time the church, the Catholic Church, identified the mermaid as temptresses. Right? They were
Oh, yeah, yeah.
trying to lure men away from the stability of land out into the chaos of the
Oh,
sea.
sirens. Sirens.
Exactly,
Yeah.
the siren song, and they were always depicted as bare-breasted, right? Something,
Hmm. Yeah.
always something feminine to lure the man away from the stability of land out into the chaos of the ocean. But what is interesting is people love the mermaid. They love the mermaid so much that the church now, later on, when we get to the end of the Middle Ages, up into the Renaissance, they start putting mermaids into churches as emblems of exemplary living, that they were living in a constant state,
Yeah.
a perpetual state of baptism, because they lived in the ocean, and that they were, one with nature. But yeah, Paracelsus, who was a great alchemist, he believed that mermaids were the fundamental element of the water, and that was kind of like the controlling spirit within the water.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, there are many African tribes that believe in mermaids, and in their folk tales, invariably these mermaids are always white skinned, which is very unusual. But Vancouver, Canada, of all places, has a statue of a mermaid because one was seen up there, and of course we have the Little Mermaid. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
ubiquitous. The same as the reason why I write about these things is because they are archetypical. Every society around the globe has them. We all know what they are, and I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what they actually are and why they change and evolve with us.
Yeah. That's like so I like the idea of the Mothman.
Hmm.
Now, I don't know if I believe in the Mothman, but I
Hmm.
like the idea of it.
Hmm.
Have you encountered any other country or city or any other region that has something like the Mothman?
Oh, of course, yeah. Cornwall in England has the Owl Man, and
Oh, okay.
that goes back to early Celtic folklore. This is going back to pre-Christian times, even pre-Roman times. So the idea that there's a winged humanoid figure out there that somehow sweeps in and impacts the world around you is ancient. It's always been with us. If you look at cylinder scrolls from Babylon, we see images, and they're almost always men, but we see the images of these men with usually two sets of wings on them, because this implies that they're able to ascend to a higher level and descend down to us, whether it's to impart information or some sort of ominous kind of precursor to what's going to happen. But these are ancient elements as well too. The idea of winged humanoids that interact with the world around us goes back to the very founding of civilization.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to say that I'm pretty sure I saw something that was probably Egyptian that was like hieroglyphics that had like a person with wings.
Right, Isis has wings in her depiction. The idea of even angelic figures is going to be coming out from that Mesopotamian era
Mhm.
and area. So the idea that where we get our winged messengers, the reason why they have wings is because they're fleeting. They can straddle two worlds and go between two worlds at once. And this is kind of like the Mothman, correct? Because it had some sort of knowledge of things that were to come, and it
Yeah.
came to impart that knowledge onto us.
Yeah, and I find that very interesting that he's like all knowing.
All knowing. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it could be maybe he's an angel for some and a demon for others, I suppose.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how many books do you have? How many books have you like written?
I've written about 22 books or so, but they're not all based upon. I mean, I do a
Right.
lot of poetry writing. I do have a bit of academic streak in me as well too. So they're not all on these things. I do write about other things as well too. But yeah. But the stuff that I've written on is like my research of the Chestnut Ridge area, ghost stories from Westmoreland County, the county in which I live in, and my on series, which covers everything, like I said, from ghost the whole way to witches, and everything in between. But I try to dabble in as much as I possibly can because I do have a lot of different interests in there,
Mhm.
and it keeps me off the streets, right? I mean, it gives me
Yeah.
something to do. So
Yeah, it keeps you off the streets,
that's right. That's
away
right.
from the gangs.
Exactly right, right, right. Yeah, so it gives me something to do, and I learn something every time I delve into these kind of myths and legends and all this folklore from around the world. And I really could not have a better hobby. I'm sure
Yeah,
you would say the same thing too.
yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I love my hobby.
yeah.
So if people were interested in looking at your books, checking out your books, buying your books, where can they do that at?
Well, check this out, Amber, because they are actually in luck. I wrote a book called "On Aquatic Monsters of the Great Lakes,"
Okay.
and I also wrote a book on vampires.
Mhm.
Very interestingly, it's called "On Vampires." Not very, uh, there, but Walmart actually picked them up. So
Walmart picked them up.
you can actually buy them at Walmart, yeah, which I'm very proud of.
Guys, you
Um,
can buy them at Walmart.
Walmart, that's right. And I actually have two of my poetry books as well that is available from Walmart as well.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, but you can catch it on Amazon. You could order them from Barnes and Noble or any bookstore. You could go to my personal website. Well, no, let's take that back. I'm actually having my
Don't do
website
that.
created. Don't do that. Um, I have had a few websites out there, and I'm not very technologically advanced, so I don't really know what I'm doing. So I want to find a
That's
really
okay.
simple one. So I'm having a simple one made for me right now.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you go to social media, right? You could
Mhm.
go to the Twitter. Is that what the kids call it?
Yeah.
Okay, you got the Twitter. You got the Facebook.
Mhm.
You got the the Snapchat. No, that doesn't work that way, does it? Uh,
I don't know.
no, I don't think it does. I don't think it does. I think I'm also on TikTok, but you can't buy my books there. But I'm on TikTok if you ever want to check that out. But no, so go to Facebook and you can look up Ronald L. Murphy Jr. That's my author page. Like it, and you can contact me from there. And I'd be looking forward to having conversations with you guys.
Okay, that's awesome. Is there anything else that you want to plug? Like, do you have a YouTube channel or anything like that?
Uh,
Or
I should. I should. Now that you're mentioning this thing, see, these are all things that I should eventually get around to, but I will one of these days.
it's tough.
Next time you have me back, I will. I am starting to book some things. The end of July in Pennsylvania, I will be at the Kecksburg UFO Festival. So
Okay.
there are some things that are so. Check on my author page on Facebook, and I will load
Yes.
that stuff up
For
there.
updates. You can
For
get all the
updates, that's
updates.
right, that's right, that's right,
Well, I gotta go because I'm cooking and I can tell that it's
that's right.
done.
It was a complete pleasure to be in the same, well, not the same room, but at least at the same time
Yeah.
together, because I truly admire you not only as an investigator but as a person, and I
Oh,
hope we
thank
get to
you.
do this again very soon.
Yes, definitely. We definitely have to do this again because I found that everything was enlightening, but
Mhm.
I didn't get to dive like real deep like I wanted to.
Oh, next time we'll dive as deep as you
We'll
want to go.
we'll dive. That's what
We
we'll
will
do.
dive to the point of drowning.
Oh my god. All right. Well, thank you so much. It
Hey,
was such a
thank you,
pleasure
my dear.
talking to
Thanks.
you.
It's a pleasure talking with you as well too, and we'll talk to you very soon again.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, thank you guys so much for watching again. Next week, the Bigfoot episode should be coming out. It's almost done. It's just being a pain, is all. But so next week, Bigfoot episode, and then we might have another special guest sometime next week. Not exactly sure. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, Michael. Oh, by the way, I do have a Patreon account that I have been working on. It is up if you guys go to my YouTube channel. In the corner on the banner, there should be a link to the Patreon account. And you guys can check out some of the tiers. Tell me what you guys think. Maybe if I should add more stuff. But it's just trying to help create a community that can support me and also be a community where we can come together and talk, and you guys will have access to like what episodes are coming next. You guys can help me pick out the locations that I go to and everything like that. But thank you guys again so much for watching, and I will see you guys later.